My name is John Gosner, and I'm a teacher in the Williamsport Area School District. I'm the Learning Center Coordinator at Williamsport Area High School. So thank you for being here today. And what we're going to kind of take a look at is just how we treat the Learning Center. You might think of it as your in-school suspension room if your school has one of those. And so we're kind of here today to look at a different viewpoint on how that space and that time can be used. And they asked me to kind of emphasize this a little bit, what we're looking at in the TFI, and we're looking at 1.7, particularly on the continuum here, looking at numbers 3 and 4 in that first line, just about emphasizing functionally relevant instructional and kind of restorative practices. And that's what we're going to really focus on today is how to take an in-school suspension room and again, take a different perspective on it and really bring in this idea of restorative practice and make it something that can really help build up students and help them invest in their own education. And so to kind of get us started, first things first is, hey, question, does your school have an ISS room? Do you have anything like that right now? Or is your school perhaps considering doing anything like that? So I see quite a number of no's there, which is I find very, very interesting. I've done a number of these webinars and actually have met with administrators from different parts of the state over the last couple of years, and I'm surprised at how many high schools or even secondary buildings don't have anything like that. So thanks for sharing that. And so, if your school does not have anything like that, is that something that you're looking into getting started? If you do have it, again, how could that space be used more productively? And so as we begin to take a look at that, a little technical difficulty there. There we go. Hey, any kind of in-school suspension room or a learning center is going to have several purposes. And the first couple of purposes are ones that we're usually familiar with. It provide a resource for a teacher who, just has to get somebody out of their room. Their behavior, their actions are kind of messing up the educational environment of their classroom. And so they need to be removed. And we use our learning center here for that. We call it a timeout. Teachers have the authority to send a student to the learning center for a timeout. They just have to call me, let me know they're coming, that kind of thing. And we keep them for the period. The other thing, more traditional, is the ISS. That's really for building administrators when a student's actions have been kind of such that they need to be removed for a day or two or maybe 3 from the educational environment. And fulfilling the purpose of these 2 purposes is very, very easy. You provide the space, provide appropriate supervision, and really probably like 99% of the high schools or secondary buildings across our country that have ISS, this is what they do. And when I took on this job 3 years ago, I kind of challenged myself, quite honestly, to kind of how could it be different? How could we make this a much more productive space? And that's where this third purpose comes into play. The third purpose, I think, is also the most difficult to try and accomplish. And the Learning Center should be a place where students are introduced to this whole concept, this whole idea of restorative justice. They're held accountable for their actions. They're removed from the educational environment. Appropriate restrictions are put in place. In Williamsport, without getting into too much detail, they can't have their cell phones on them. We're a Chromebook. We're a 1-to-1 district, so they've all got Chromebooks. But I control their Chromebooks and what they can do and can't do on those things. But in addition, when a student comes into the Learning Center, they have the opportunity to gain knowledge and the tools to make better decisions moving forward. And that's where you really kind of begin to see a change there. And I think, anecdotally speaking, I think from all of our experiences, we can probably agree that students more and more they're coming to us without that foundation, without those tools to kind of grow and learn and make appropriate decisions. So we're looking for a way to help them begin to build that foundation, gather those tools so they'd be able to do that. And in order to make this happen, we would need a structured curriculum. It wasn't something where you just kind of make it up as you go along. Really looking for something that would be structured, would provide incentives as well as consequences for their time in the Learning Center. And as far as curriculum goes, after reviewing a number of different options out there here in Williamsport, we selected a program called Ripple Effects. And again, just to give you a little more background, how I came upon Ripple Effects is actually as I was looking at how I could develop all of this and what we needed to do, I stumbled across a teacher in Georgia named Rosie Cooper and found out a paper she had published and some work she had done. And so I reached out to her. And as happens, the email kind of bounced back. She wasn't there anymore. So I kind of just started Googling Rosie Cooper, educator. Turns out she's now a professor in the LSU system, education professor. And so I reached out to her there. She was very generous with her time, sent me her cell number, and we would talk, and I would talk through ideas and models with her as she was traveling from one conference to another for class or whatever. And so she was great, and she's the one who kind of pointed me towards Ripple Effects. It's kind of all built on that social emotional learning program. It's been very, very good, designated as a model program. I mean, there's lots of different things like this. Actually, I need to update this now. Over 20 different modules with 430 lessons. That number is actually closer to 500 now. And it's a wonderfully flexible program. And they've got their own modules, but there's still the ability for you, without getting into too much of a commercial on Ripple Effects here, to build your own playlist. I over the last couple of years have developed over 20 playlists that I use. And so when a student comes to me in the Learning Center, I assign them a playlist of lessons in Ripple Effects that they have to complete. And these are all kind of built on what got them, what action, what behaviors got them in there. So it's an opportunity for them to learn throughout the day on how they can make better decisions to not land back in the Learning Center. So again, it's all about building that foundation, that toolbox for them to do better moving forward. Okay. Now, the question then is, how do we install these measures of accountability? How do we make this curriculum successful? How can we really kind of make a difference in what we're trying to do? And so here are some changes I made to our Learning Center. Again, I think the average high school for an in-school suspension room, the way I describe it, it's kind of a black hole, man. Students are just put in there. They're assigned there because of their behaviors. And then you've got someone in there monitoring it, or it might be somebody different every period or different people throughout the day. And you know what? As long as there's not a riot in there, that's okay. And so I wanted it to be a much more productive space. And so what you're going to see is kind of elements of a kind of a vision document that I wrote to our principal and our superintendent, just to see if we could work this out. And so students assigned to the Learning Center, instead of just incentivizing everything, actually added to the consequences first. And so anybody that gets a day in the Learning Center also gets detention after school that day. So our school day starts at 7:40, detention goes till 4 o'clock. So they're in the Learning Center for a very long time. In the Learning Center, we're going to follow the bell schedule. Instead of just being a black hole, we actually follow the bell schedule now every day. The periods mean something. Students will be given the option of beginning first period working on their classwork. And I tell students right from the start, because I conference with every student one-on-one when they're in there for the day, it doesn't matter to me what class you're working on, what period. I don't care if it's first period, you can be doing fifth period work. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you're getting stuff done, that you're using your time wisely. And the option will be revisited each period or every other period. As long as they're working on classwork or Ripple Effects, then they are doing what they need to do. And again, the expectation is they have a certain number of Ripple Effects lessons they have to complete each day. And I'll get into a little bit more of that as we go along here. Okay. More changes. Everything is built on a point system in the Learning Center. So, and it's very, very simple. It's 1 point per period. You either get the point or you don't. You get the point by working most or all the period on classwork and or Ripple Effects lessons. So we keep it very, very simple. Okay. And points are earned on a period by period basis. So students always know how they're doing. And but I also emphasize to them that you can't decide you're going to take a break and then go back and try and earn a point you've lost. Once you lose a point, it's gone forever. But now, what's the incentive for this? And this is a beautiful thing. And I want to kind of really make sure you're paying attention. Extra restroom breaks as needed. They come into that day knowing you get 3 restroom breaks. So choose wisely. So if you decide to go to sleep or not get anything done, you're only going to get 3 restroom breaks. So be careful. But if they're earning their points, they're doing what they're supposed to do, they can use the restroom as needed. Earning 5 points in the morning for periods 1 through 5. If you get those 5 points in the morning, then you've earned the privilege of being able to go to the cafeteria for lunch. If they don't get that, if they're in the Learning Center for lunch, they're getting a bag lunch with a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in it. But if they've earned their points for periods 1 through 5, they can go to the cafeteria. They're out of the Learning Center for 30 minutes. They can hang out with their friends. They get the full menu in our cafeteria. And so that's a winner. Getting back from lunch on time, earning their points for 6 and 7, getting 7 points on the day, then I can excuse them from detention. Now, here's why those incentives are so important. If you look at those two big, the bottom, the second and third one, getting to go to the cafeteria for lunch, getting out of detention, that's their time. That is their time. There's no law of diminishing returns on their time. That's always incredibly valuable to them. So that has really been a fantastic motivator for students. If a student is assigned multiple days, occasionally we'll get a student who's got 2 days or 3 days in the Learning Center, then they've got the opportunity to earn their way out of the Learning Center over that time. Okay. There's the example there. If they've got 2 days in the Learning Center and they earn their 7 points on day 1, they've been excused from detention. They come in the next day, and actually, 5 points for periods 1 through 5. When they leave for lunch, they're done on that second day. So they get out earlier. Again, the value there, the incentive is their time. And I can't emphasize enough, there's no law of diminishing returns on their time. Okay. Consequences, they're very, very simple. They don't earn the points. They're staying in the Learning Center for lunch. They've got detention after school. Okay. That's just the way it works. Now, the points, again, kind of, as I said, points are earned on a period by period basis. In other words, you can't come in, go to sleep. Hey, Mr. Gouser, I'm just going to put my head down and go to sleep here for a little while. I'll wake up around third period and get to work. Dude, once you lose a point, it's gone forever. Once you lose a point, you're here for lunch, you're here for detention. That's not an option. Okay. So if you want to earn the points, you got to start right away. And I mentioned ripple effects earlier. I'm going to get into that a little bit more with you guys here. Ripple effects, an average lesson takes a student about 10 to 15 minutes to do. The playlists I put together all have anywhere from 10 to 12 lessons on them. The expectation is that they'll complete at least 7 lessons during the school day. More is good, I tell them, but fewer than that, you're not going to get out of detention. Okay, they've got to have at least 7 of those done by the end of 7th period, which is our last period of the day, to be able to get excused from detention. And again, the goal of all of this, the goal of the ripple effects lessons is to help them build those tools to be more successful, to invest in their own education. I'll have students tell me, hey, Mr. Gouser, I'm not going to do the ripple effects. I'm just going to work on school. I'm going to get caught up in all my classes. And I'll tell them, that's fine. I definitely want you to work on that, but you're not in the Learning Center today to catch up on back work. You're in here as a consequence of your behavior and your actions in school. So ripple effects is a non-negotiable. You have to get at least 7 of those lessons done if you want to try and earn the incentives. It's not an option to opt out of the ripple effects lessons. Okay. Now, ripple effects, again, I don't want to, again, be too much of a commercial for this, but I'm in year 3 of using this program, and I like it more now than I did when we first got it. And I've been very, very happy with it. I tell students when we log on, if they've never been in it before, there's a little bit of a tutorial that it takes a minute or 2 to go through. Once you've gotten through the tutorial, if you look here, you see there's some drop-down menus right here. The one is called playlist. When they click on that, you'll see the playlist I've assigned to you. You click on that, the playlist will come up, and the name of the playlist will be here on the left side. All the lessons down here in the middle of the screen. You can go in any order, pick any lesson you want. When you pick a lesson, that's what you're seeing here kind of in this main part of the screen. That's what a lesson looks like when you get into it. There's tabs here on the left side. You work your way down the tabs. Each tab will have a brief little passage to read, maybe something to listen to or a video to watch. And I usually give them headphones for that sort of stuff. And then towards the bottom, you see here 2 or 3 of the icons, or 2 or 3 of the tabs will have a little white icon. That's where there's an activity to do, a prompt to respond to, or questions to answer. And so they go through that. And again, I'm conferencing with them. Just to remind you, I'm conferencing with them 3, 4, 5 times a day, and we're processing these lessons together. We're talking about them, what they're pulling out of it. We're checking in. They always know where they stand on these lessons. So they can work way through. And once they're done with the lesson, they go back to the playlist. If they successfully completed the lesson, there's a green check mark by the lesson. So they know they've successfully done that. The goal is to at least 7 green check marks by the end of their day. Now, the question then becomes, is it working? And so, yeah, it's been fantastically successful. I was sharing with some folks right before we got started here. We've been doing this now for 2 years. My first semester in there was just kind of a get acquainted with the Learning Center, see how things operate. And I didn't institute any changes until January of 2024. So in just January of 2024, you see, we had 440 student days. That's not 440 students. It was 440 student days in the Learning Center just that semester. And it was 185 unique students. Okay. So then we begin to see things drop drastically from 440 fall semester, 296, from 185 to 145 students. Last spring, 327 student days. Okay, that's an uptick a little bit from here. But if you look over here, unique students, the number of different students we had in the Learning Center, down to 121. That's a 35% drop in just a year. And I can tell you, I don't have it here on the slide, and it's because I haven't put together the graphics for it yet, but my data from our first semester is almost identical, quite honestly, to the spring semester. About 120 students, unique students, and about 325 student days in the Learning Center. So we've seen a drastic drop over this time. And then we've seen the recidivism rate drop tremendously. But then, what else does it demonstrate here? And you see on these charts here, it's very, very simple. What this really kind of communicates, if you look at that bottom chart, of those students in the Learning Center who can earn incentives, how many of them are doing that? How many of them are earning those incentives? About 70% of the students in the Learning Center are earning the incentives. Here's what that means. They are spending the overwhelming majority of their day engaged in their own education. They're spending time in ripple effects, and they're processing the ripple effects lessons. They're spending time in their classwork and getting assignments done and turned in either to me in hard copy that I get to their teachers, or through Schoology, which is the online platform we use here in Williamsport. And what kind of feedback as I'm getting, and this is kind of difficult to read. I realize that, but these are all comments from Williamsport students over the last year and a half in how they have kind of what they've pulled out of doing ripple effects, what they've pulled out of their time in the Learning Center. So they're valuable. They're reflecting ripple effects, and the conferencing with me has really kind of helped them reflect and process what got them there, which I think is part of what's helped lead to kind of our recidivism rate dropping. Okay. So it's been very, very good. And kind of in conclusion, because I know I'm up against kind of my time when we wanted to open up the Q&A here. Hey, how can you do this? Getting started, develop a vision. Find someone who wants to do this, not just someone to occupy and put their feet up and ride out the last couple of years of their career, monitoring the in-school suspension room, but someone who's looking to actually make a change and make a difference. Getting better. How can you continue to get better? Don't stop learning. What's the next step? How can we improve? That hasn't stopped for me, and the improvements and the changes can be very, very simple. The big change this year in the Learning Center was really simple. Students who earn their points, they have an exit ticket now. It's a 3-2-1 exit ticket. It's where I got all those comments from. 3-2-1. What are 3 takeaways from doing ripple effects today? What are 3 things you learned from the ripple effects lesson? So there's the 3. The 2, what are 2 actions, 2 things you can do to not get put back in here? Kind of forces them to think about, gosh, what can I do? And then this last one is really important. Is there one person, one adult in this building who you think you can trust? So, and that kind of gets them to think about the adults they come in contact with here in the building. With that, I will reach out to the teacher who that student has identified. Hey, so-and-so finished up successfully their time in the Learning Center. They identified you as a person that they trust in this building. Don't want you to do anything different with them. Don't want you to let them know I told you this. Just thank you for having such a positive influence. One last thing I think it's really important to mention is our in-school suspension. It's not just me, it's a team of folks. I start my day. I've got a special ed teacher with me. He's fantastic at helping to make sure that necessary modifications are needed that for students, our IEP kids. At the end of the day, I've got another special ed teacher in there. And because we've been so successful, here's one of the cool things that happens with dedicated colleagues is we've got special ed teachers now who will just take part of their prep time or part of their lunch time, or maybe they'll, hey, they got a break in a class and they'll come and check, even if they don't have kids on their caseload in there, they'll come and check and see if anybody needs anything because they know we're using our time in there and trying to be constructive with it. So I know I've kind of flew through that stuff, but our time is kind of limited. So at this point, we wanted to open up for any questions that you guys might have, or if there's anything you wanted me to elaborate any more on or anything like that.